Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to see us. We know that it's a little bit late, but we welcome you with us to speak about how to teach investigative journalism today. I'm very happy to have with me in this panel, so Mark Lee Hunter, the founder and the one who read our guideline, famous guideline in ARIJ, and we are happy today to make him sign the new version of the guideline about investigative journalism. So thank you, Mark, for being with us. We have Pia Thordsen, the board member of ARIJ, and a Danish journalist as well. And we have Mrs. Noha El-Mikawy from the American Cairo, the American University in Cairo. So thank you for everybody to be there with us, and we are going to start. So I'm going to start with Pia, because you are the one who was with us, with ARIJ from the beginning, and you are the one who was in the beginning of the idea of creating this guide of ARIJ, then of recreation of ARIJ. And I guess that at this time, you had the goal of what you want really to create behind this guide and behind the ARIJ Foundation. So can you speak a little bit about this?
Yes, indeed. We were in a context where we were setting up ARIJ as an organization. We had been working with that for a couple of years before we started thinking about doing a manual. And we came down here, and when I say we, it was basically, we were funded by a Danish grant at the time. And we were the Danish Association for Investigative Journalism, who, together with IMS, International Media Support, had contacted a number of journalists down here to hear if they needed any help with promoting investigative journalism in the region. And the answer was yes, we do. And we would like to have funds to do investigations, but you also have to train us. That was basically what we were told from the people that we met down here. So we decided to set up this organization, and the problem was that, or the challenge was that there was not anything to build on, basically. I mean, there probably were journalists in the region doing investigative journalism, but it was not like a mainstream thing to do. And definitely, most journalists did not know what the concept was, and they had never been working with it. So how do you start building capacity? That was a big question. And so another part of the context is that in 2001, the Global Investigative Journalism movement had started. It started in Copenhagen with a conference with 350 people, journalists from, I think, 53 countries. And as far as I recall, and Mark, you might remember it better, but as far as I recall, there was none from the Arab world.
No, and none from France either, except for me. And I'm an American living in France.
Yeah. So it was obvious that we were kind of missing some, representation from this part of the world in the global movement. And I think it's very important to have people in every region. And investigative journalism was not a very old concept. So it was quite a new, it had like what, Mark, 20, 25 years behind it at the time, where we had really been working with the concept. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was quite a new concept, so it was not a very strange thing that it was not a global concept at the time. And so we started ARIJ, and we started basically training based on the knowledge that we had, the experience that we had. And Hanene Zbiss, who ran the organization at the time herself, was not an investigative journalist back then. She has become a very good one during this process. So we basically needed a tool. we needed something that could guide us through this process of teaching. And we also needed something to give to journalists, like a kind of, you can't make a recipe for an investigation, but you can give tools and guidelines for how to get started and how to organize your investigation. And I think that was actually what we did. So the goal was creating a tool that would enable us to fulfill the mission of ARIJ, you could say, which was empowering journalists in the MENA region. And to offer the public journalism they could trust, because that was also, of course, very important. There was an issue of trust then in media in this part of the world, as there still is an issue of trust with media all over the world these days. So why did we want to do this? Well, first of all, you could say that the role of investigative journalism, what is that? So it is uncovering misuse of power and corruption and misconduct, be it financial, political, religious, institutional, whatever, and holding people in power to account, and upholding values such as fairness and justice, and transparency and accuracy and accountability and documentation, and fact-checking and impartiality, and aiming to the best of our ability to be objective. So there were all these concepts that comes with investigative journalism that should come with all kinds of journalism, but which is extremely important to investigative journalism. And I think in many ways we are more observant of these principles than maybe the press is in general. We had the strong belief that documented and fact-based journalism is a necessary foundation for any well-functioning society. So journalism can function as a safety valve, like letting the steam out, you could say. So by reflecting the reality of people, the reality that people live in, and giving them a voice and qualifying their choices. So again, pushing people in power to make decisions that serve the public need. So I think these were all of the goals. And when talking about this and when thinking about this, I always like to quote Maria Ressa, who is one of the big investigative journalists of our time, who, when she got her Nobel Prize, said it this way: without facts, you can't have truth, and without truth, you can't have trust. And without trust, we have no shared reality, no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with our world's existential problems. And I think that's really very true. And I think this is why we are in business, because we need to make sure that people get information that has this quality to create truth and to create trust. So this is not only true for democracies, it also goes, I think, in all kinds of regimes, that without trust and a shared reality, how can we even move on as a human race? So the journalistic contribution to establishing trust and a shared reality is to uncover and uncover the real problems of the world, and if possible, to point to verified solutions. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that this was
the goals, the principal goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I met Mark through the global movement, and he had this concept of the hypothesis.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard him talk about that, it was like, oh my God, this is the first time I have heard a journalist actually put a method and a methodology, a thought-through methodology behind it. And Mark will tell more about how thought-through that was. But now you all got the manual, and I'm sure that the baby doll story is still in there, Mark, is it?
Sure.
Yeah. So read that. It's really interesting how by using the concept of a hypothesis, you actually go from thinking one thing about the world and finding out that it's not, your hypothesis is not true, but there is something else which is even worse. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, so I'm not going to tell you more. Maybe Mark will.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think that this way of working with the hypothesis in a scientific way, it's like a scientific approach to journalism, and I think that's really important. Because, and I think maybe I should get back to that later because it also speaks into the context that we're in now. But I think it's very valuable what Mark has come up with, and I will leave it to him to talk a bit more about the hypothesis. But I think this helped the organization really put a path to how we actually work with investigative journalism and how we document things and how we can actually do this in an organized way and not waste our time, sliding down all kinds of side roads.
Thank you, Pia. So you spoke about tool, and Mark gave us this tool. So Mark, could you speak about a little bit how you come up with this tool, how you developed this tool, and how you are teaching with this tool?
Okay. One of the things we need to do is to show our students how to teach themselves. There's only so much we can give them. And I think many of my students make the same mistake that I made for years, which is that they are always saying to themselves, oh, I didn't do this well. Oh, I did this badly. Oh, I did a mistake. Oh, I'm awful. Oh, I'll never get anywhere. I did that for many years. And then one day I said to myself, how come I don't spend more time thinking about what I do right? How come I don't spend more time thinking about how I made something work? And the way I came up with this method was by looking at a story that began as a train wreck and turned it around into something that won me a number of awards about prematurely born babies in the US. And I had no idea how I'd done it because I was always rushing behind the story, trying to get the train back on the tracks. So one day I sat down and analyzed it, and I realized that I had started with a hypothesis, a very wrong hypothesis that my boss had given me. But that was all the same a hypothesis, which meant it could be verified, you could take it apart, you could see what the components were, and then verify them. And by verifying those components, I went to an entirely different place. And then, once I put this out into the public domain, other people started coming forward and saying, we can complete this. We can come up with a better way of doing it. And you all know the results since. I think everybody in this room is familiar with the ARIJ manual, so thank you for having used it and for all of that. I'd like to speak about something else now, if I may. Okay. People are always talking, and our students will hear this, about how dangerous the world is, and we know, all of us, the people in this room know better than anyone else, how dangerous it is. And investigative journalism is said to be the most dangerous job of all in journalism. It's not, as we're seeing in Gaza right now. But there are dangers associated with it. What we don't talk to our students about enough are the immense opportunities that this work opens up for them. If you know how to investigate, you will never be out of a job. The job may not be in journalism, it may be in academia, it may be in a business school. I worked in a business school for 20 years doing investigations. I'm not sure they understood why they were paying me, but they did. And, NGOs need people who can find things out. There are many, many, many ways that someone who has the skills that you are teaching your students can make a rich and worthwhile life in the company of people they respect and admire. Not everyone can say that. Most people can't say that. And by teaching them to investigate every day, you're teaching them to take control of their lives, to take control of what they think about and what they are going to find out, and to form relationships with people where they give you their hearts. They bring you into their lives. They show you what the world really is. And they develop the courage to see the world as it is. And all of these things make an immense difference in the kind of life you can have. And before we think of skills or, the technical aspects of the job, I think we need to help our students understand that we are giving them a chance to become someone else, to become someone who's stronger and deeper than they ever realized they could be. I can't do that for all of my students, okay? And I must tell you, that if you are teaching, there will be students who fail. They may not fail in grades, okay? I mean, I'm a famously soft grader. I want my students to walk out of there with a grade, with a passing grade, and I'll do a lot for that. But I recognize on the basis of data, hey, there's that magic word, data. I realize on the basis of 300 students that I had at a French university over 12 years, that 20% of my students are never going to get it. They will not have the courage or the character to challenge themselves. I'll try and make it a soft landing for them, but I am not going to use all of my time trying to persuade them to become someone else. I want them to discover who they want to be for themselves. If they won't do it, I am not dragging them. Another 60% have a shot, have a chance to be better than they thought they could be. They can at least appreciate what an investigator does, how an investigator looks at the world and moves through the world. And that's a lot. And then there are 20% who I do my best not to be jealous of because they're amazing. And they're so much younger than me. My God, time is the only thing you never get back, which is something I tell them as well, not to waste their time, to take the chance when the chance is in front of them. And that 20%, perhaps you'll be lucky, and for you it will be 25 or 40 or even 50%. But that 20%, shall we say, minimum, are the people who are going to enable all of the rest of us to keep going, knowing that we're not wasting our time on this earth, and that, maybe there's a chance that things will be better tomorrow than they are today, which at the moment is not a very high fence to jump over. Okay?
Okay. So let's see what is the reality in the Arab world, asking Dr. Noha El-Mikawy what is happening in the American University in Cairo. I know that you have a section for journalism. So according to you, how is the investigative journalism can impact the teaching the journalism in your university?
Yeah. Thank you, Hanene, for the question and for having me join this fantastic panel. Very inspiring words have already been said. To answer your question, it's for us about an important reality that we live in a world in a world of intensity, not only intensity of conflict, but an intensity of contested knowledge, not only political knowledge, but economic and scientific knowledge, highly contested and highly polarized communities. Not a single journalist that I can think of doesn't wake up and think of a story that ends up falling within that context of an intensity of contested knowledge. Even on journalists covering climate change, again, the science is contested, the facts are contested, and once you bring the story out, you are bound to hit on highly polarized communities that think you are a devil or you are an angel. We are very, very aware of this context in which we teach students the skills of journalism, that it is a context of high volatility and high uncertainty. Hence, I am extremely grateful for what I heard already, particularly about the fact that investigative journalism are basic fundamentals for success in life, irrespective of which field you choose as your path. I come from a school inside the American University that's a very hybrid school. It's a professional school for primarily master's students, but also undergraduate in journalism. And the school is hybrid because it houses the Department of Journalism, but also the Department of Law and the Department of Public Policy and Global Affairs. The combination of those different fields is a fantastic way of exactly doing what the speakers have said. You become more able as a professional in any one of those fields if you are armed by the skills of an investigative journalist, even if you do not end up putting that on your business card.
Thank you for making me feel like I know what I'm talking about.
Do you want to comment? Or I'll come back to Pia. I'll come back to you, Mark.
Okay.
Okay. So I wanted Pia to tell me about the challenges of today. I know that you fixed goals at that time when you started building all of this, ARIJ conference, ARIJ organization, and this guideline, with an objective to have covering the Arab world from the vision of the Arab journalist and making the responsible in our countries accountable. Now, regarding to the challenge of today, the return of dictatorship, the propaganda, the spread of fake news, we have a lot of challenge, and all those war zones that are going to spread more and more. So, according to you, what are the challenges today for investigative journalism, or what you want to reach now as since you are the board member of ARIJ? So I think that you have a map of what you want to fulfill maybe in the next years regarding to all of those challenges.
Well, I think we have been talking about, you talked about it, and you're mentioning it as well, that this situation where we have now, where fake news and misinformation and what did you call it? Contested knowledge. That's a very good way of saying it. So the contested knowledge creates its own, challenges for us as journalists, and it gives investigative journalists a specific task, I think, which is to dig out the truth. And that was also why I mentioned Maria Resa's quote, because I think it's so central to not only what the challenge was back then, but what the eternal challenge for investigative journalism and for journalism altogether is. To tell the truth and to win the trust of people, because this is still our big challenge. And how do we do that? in a world which is more and more complicated and where people get their information and their knowledge from influencers and not from established media anymore, at least not most people. So I think that we have some major challenges. So I think one of the big challenges we have is really how to get in contact with people. I mean, one thing is just how do we actually uncover and verify things in a world where there are contested realities and contested knowledge, but how do we actually manage to get in contact with the people that we need to get in contact with and to establish ourselves as someone who is trusted. And I think this is our big challenge. It's also one of our big opportunities, because if we manage to do so, I think we will manage to establish ourselves as an alternative to all these influencers and some of them might be good. I'm not saying that they're all bad, but some of them are definitely bad and definitely not living up to the ethical and journalistic standards that we adhere to in our profession. So I think we have a big task ahead of us of finding out how to tell stories in a way that is compelling and to get close to people. I think this is extremely important, to get close to our users, because if we're not close to them, we lose them. And I think, Mark, you have also, I mean, your community-based journalism book, you also mentioned this, that this is what we need to do. And I think that there is so much importance for us as investigative journalists to say, okay, one thing we need to do is get better at following up on the technological developments and everything that's going on and improving our skills here. But the other big challenge for us, and maybe the biggest, is getting to people.
Okay. I'll ask you the same question, but I will relate it a little bit, Mark, to this guide, because you updated the guides. This means that there are new needs from investigative journalists. So why did you need to update it, and what are the new needs regarding the new challenges?
Well, I'm not ashamed of the first version of the book, okay? It helped a lot of people. I'm very proud I did it. But there were things I left out that were just inexplicable. Probably the biggest is the concept of timelines, using timelines to develop a way into a story and to understand what happened. It's very much developed in this book. It was completely absent from the first version. And I don't know why, because I'd been doing it for years. But, you know, sometimes you forget what you know in the heat of the moment. So we fixed that. But there's something else that we added to the book that I think is even more important. It's the idea of impact. Okay, how impact has evolved. We used to think it was enough to just tell the story. Now we're thinking about ways that, you know, we can make the story a way to change the world more directly. And I want to link this back to what Pia just said. You know, for decades in journalism education, the presumption was that we were going to turn out students who would go to work for big media houses, and they would have salaries, and they would have shows, and they would have columns, and all of this stuff. And they would be taken care of almost as if they were civil servants. Okay? That world doesn't exist anymore. The media industry is in what is called secular decline, and this has been apparent since the late 1990s. So we need to be saying to our students, we want you to live from this. Okay, of course you can get a job with these skills and all that, but maybe you can create your job. And if you are going to create your job, my theory, and this is not a theory in the air, okay, I spent more than 10 years at INSEAD, a business school, in a research unit that was studying these questions. That doesn't mean we know everything, and it doesn't mean that we're right, but it does mean that we published in scholarly journals and that we were able to develop a coherent way of looking things. And what we concluded was that a bigger and bigger share of the media industry, the industry that employs our students, is going to be aimed at communities of practice or interest. People who care about certain things or people who do certain things. And we are going to not just objectively inform these people. Of course, we are going to give them the facts, the reality that they need in order to survive and thrive. But beyond that, we are going to be on their side. We're going to try to protect them. We're going to try to promote their communities so that other people want to join it and they can become stronger. And we're going to help them prevail in their fight against their adversaries, against the people who want to destroy their communities. And, you know, at ARIJ, I have met so many people who are doing this. I'll just cite my dear friend Lena Shawaf of Radio Rosanna, which is based in Paris and which serves the Syrian people, not the Syrian state, the Syrian people and the Syrian expatriate community and the people who want to live in a better Syria when the current troubles are done, as they will be someday. And, you know, Rosanna matters to people. People are keeping them alive because Rosanna deals with the subjects that actually happen. It deals with domestic abuse. It deals with how to become a citizen of another country. It deals with, you know, how you can feed your family when you don't have a lot of money. These things may seem humble, and it also deals with subjects like how the Russians bought the Syrian health system after they destroyed it, and how Syrian doctors are trying to make new lives abroad when they can't get reaccredited. Okay, I worked on that with Rosanna. And, you know, to me, these are examples of how we can make a different kind of media industry using our investigative skills to make people's lives better every day, not just to bring down corrupt politicians or to, you know, expose drug traffics or things like that. Of course that matters. Of course it's important. But we can also actively seek to help the people who rely on us lead better lives. And when we do that, we're going to find that they trust us a lot more because they can see that what we're telling them works. And I feel very badly about this. Doctor, I'm not trying to criticize your school. I don't know your curriculum, and I understand that you're doing some great things. Will you allow me to ask you, are you also cooperating with the business school in your university? Yes. You are so smart, doctor. Do you realize how few journalism schools have figured that out?
Yeah, if you want to answer him. And
Yes.
just I'm going to ask you a question about your collaboration as educative institution with your environment, especially with civil society, with organization like ARIJ, how this could help you teaching journalism.
Thank you. In fact, it is a guiding principle, a North Star for the entire university, not just the school I'm with, to increase as much as we can the dose of interdisciplinary education. So the collaborations I seek on a daily basis with the School of Business, with the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, with the School of Engineering, is part of my definition of success. Because the skills, whether it is investigative journalism or legal awareness and legal training or understanding of the public policy environment, all these are skills that can only prove themselves useful if used in other schools, by other graduates from other disciplines. Otherwise, they remain idle skills, okay? So the same thing applies to civil society. One of our North Stars in the university at large and in the school is get the students exposed as much as you possibly can to the work done outside of the campus and the classroom, mainly in civil society, by inviting them in and sending our students out. I find in the last 2 days here in ARIJ a lot of potential for collaboration between us as an educational institution and ARIJ and its network in general. Hanene, let me tell you that partnerships are key to the challenges that you asked Pia to list for you. And let me give you some extra challenges that we are very vividly aware of in our school and in the Department of Journalism. Number one, data. More and more, the world is closing up on data and not allowing free circulation of data. And that happens to be, unfortunately, a feature of democratic regimes as much as non-democratic regimes. And hence, we are more and more offering courses on data science and the use of open sources, etc. Data will become a scarce resource before we know it,
Oh, no.
even in democratic regimes. That's one challenge. The second challenge is the legal framework in which free speech is taking place. Many countries around the world have very, very unhelpful libel laws and no laws whatsoever in protection of whistleblowers. These are the people whom we have to build trust with as sources. If the country doesn't know how to protect a whistleblower, the journalist will not know how to protect a whistleblower. So these are challenges from a legal perspective that we are very keenly aware of right now. Third incredible challenge, institutional decay. In democracies and non-democracies alike, the judiciary is decaying in many parts of the world. Local governance, local authorities are decaying in many parts of the world. And these are the people that the journalist, if he or she are doing their job well, are immediately in contact with. The judiciary to protect them and local governance to answer and be accountable to the behavior that the journalist is uncovering. If these institutions are in decay, oh boy, the investigative journalist has big trouble. And finally, and I'll stop there, there is a challenge that I'm becoming increasingly aware of as something we need to incorporate in all of our work in education or in civil society, and that's the collective mental well-being of journalists in any society, not only in conflict societies, because most societies are becoming polarized. Collective mental well-being is underestimated, and the result can be horrendous in production of knowledge and consumption thereof.
Thank you. So thank you all. We have 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open the floor for the debate. So if someone have a question, please raise your hand. Yeah, there is a question here. Can I have a mic?
My name is Saeed. I'm from Yemen. I'm investigative journalist from Yemen. On the stage, we have an academic institution, AUC, and in the middle, ARIJ, and veteran Mark. So my question to Mark, what's the best way to produce professional investigative journalists? Through academic institutions or NGOs or shadowing or being trained by a veteran journalist like you?
You know, thank you for asking that question. I actually never thought of it. Even though I've worked with NGOs, I've worked in academia, and I work in the field as an investigative journalist. To me, it doesn't matter. But the conditions of the work are different. When I worked with Greenpeace, okay, I worked on a project with Greenpeace. It was one of the happiest experiences of my life because it was a trans-border investigation. Greenpeace respected our ethics and our conditions completely. They gave us an adequate budget to get the job done. And most important, when it was done, they went to Brussels and lobbied to get change based on our work, and they got it. I was so happy I could have wept. Okay? I've done so many investigative projects where, okay, I comforted someone who was a victim. That's important. Sometimes I got a result because something stopped that had been there before. Once or twice I contributed to a reform, but it took 11 years. Okay? And the experience of working with an NGO that could get a result, that had lobbying muscle, was thrilling. Okay? Honestly thrilling. Working in academia, there are other thrills. Okay? Because if you know how to investigate reality, if you know how to, find the data and interpret the data, and by data I don't just mean numbers and digits. I mean, what's happening inside people, inside their heads, inside their companies, for example. Okay, if you can get a grasp on that, suddenly you have conceptual tools. And there are people who think that academics are just useless eggheads who spend their time spinning silly theories. And unfortunately, there are a lot of those. But there are also people who say, like Karl Marx, and I am not a Marxist, but I think Marx figured out a lot of things right, okay, which was that, the point is not to understand the world, the point is to change it. Okay? And there are people in academia who do that, who care about that, and they do change the world. And working with those people is inspiring and uplifting. And then there's our breed, the people who see things before anyone else, the people who expose the reality or who find the meaning in the chaos before anyone can conceptualize it. All of these things are complementary, and moving from one to the other of them has been, the great chance of my own life. And I hope that more of my students will be able to do that too. And by the way, if you are a working journalist and you discover that you like teaching, I urge you from the bottom of my heart to get a doctorate. Okay? For several reasons. One is that it will give you a knowledge base that will nourish you for the rest of your life. And speaking personally, okay, I was a mid-career doctorate, okay? It was too late to be on a tenure track, and that probably saved me, because if I had only spent my time doing publications for academic journals, I would really have regretted it. But the reason I did the doctorate was that I understood, because I went through everything I had published over a period of like 10 years. And I could see no meaning in most of what I had done. And I thought, I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it. And until I solve that problem, I won't be able to advance. And that's why I went to do a doctorate. And I have to tell you, it did solve that problem for me. And I've seen that happen for other people. So when I see a journalist who has a brain and curiosity and cares about finding out how things work and how they might work, like an investigative journalist, that's someone who could do a doctorate. And the doctorate will open new possibilities, new encounters, new sources of enrichment in every sense of that word. personal enrichment, intellectual enrichment, material enrichment, even though professors don't get rich unless they give TED Talks, okay? But, you know, if you like to teach, if you find that it inspires you to inspire younger people, go the whole way. Add to knowledge, that's what we call it in academia, add to knowledge and add to yourself. Give yourself that gift. It means a few years of double shifts. Okay, well, you're probably doing that anyway. You know, so it's not going to hurt you to do it a little while longer. I hope I've answered your question and I haven't dragged it over a cliff.
Thank you, Mark. We have still 3 minutes and a half. We can take another question. Yes. Could you come to this mic so we can listen to you?
طيب مهدي حامد من اليمن.
Mahdi Hamid from Yemen. I believe the hypothesis and that successful ideas would lead to revealing facts that are supposed to be or intended to be hidden. The facts or the investigative reports would reveal such facts. However, while revealing or exposing such facts that are supposed to be hidden would not lead to ending the corruption or additional corruption operations.
Saying that the most successful investigation lead to prove some realities and to uncover some aspect of corruption, but it doesn't lead to stop corruption because they're gonna have another case. So what do you think about that? Your question is addressed to the okay, so
Yes.
if you can answer him.
Corruption is only one subject of investigation. I mean, you know, Pia is much more expert in the notion of constructive journalism than I am, which involves seeking to use our tools to actually build a better place, a better world, where people will be safer from corruption. But there are endless subjects we can do that do not involve violence, that do not involve criminality, and do not involve corruption, that are extremely necessary to people. You know, if you look at what's happening all over the world now, people are running out of clean water, they're running out of clean housing that they can afford. The education that's offered to their children is going downhill. I mean, these are real problems that people have to deal with, and we can be investigating paths forward out of these dilemmas. Now, Hanene, our host, said something to me a little while ago, which I knew but I'd forgotten, which is that every solution creates a new problem. The bad part is that means we will always have more work to do. And the good part is we will always have work to do.
This is a good conclusion, Mark, to our panel. Thank you all. Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Mrs. Noha. Thank you, Mark, for all your remarks and all your insight. Thank you for all the public who were very patient to stay with us till this time. And we hope to see you in the next sessions.